Understandably, endgame activities in Hypixel Skyblock are never really cheap. For example, the weaponry can set you back billions of coins. The same goes for the armor needed, maybe the pet as well. Honestly, the list is endless. Now, the reason why things like Master Mode Floor 7, Higher Tiers of Kudra, and Blaze Slayer appeal to players is because you can make a ton of money from doing them. And the reason why those activities are so profitable is because there's pretty high barriers to entry in order to actually be able to do these activities. Players need really good magical power, players need billions and billions and billions of coins worth of weapons, armor, pets, and so on. Which means that these activities are usually exclusive and limited to players that are able to do them, of course, but those players that are able to do them must have met the requirements, which is not really that common for players. Because there aren't a huge amount of players actually completing these activities, this means that the items that you drop from these activities have relatively low supply. Assuming the demand stays the same for an item, if it goes from relatively high to relatively low, then it's of course going to increase in price. Or if the supply has always been low, then the price is always going to be high. And that's why it ends up being so much profit. Because you aren't able to obtain the items you get from these activities in any other blocks of the game. However, today we're going to take a look at Blaze Slayer and uncover if it's really as expensive as you think to actually do. I'm looking at the potential drops and how much they cost, and the chances there actually are for you to actually drop these items from each individual Slayer boss. We'll see how profitable it really is compared to how much you spend. But before we get into any of that, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. Also, you should subscribe to the channel, it does help out a lot. And you should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer slayers and dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Now, the main reason why your Blaze Slayer setup always used to be really expensive is because the prices of the daggers. Now, most players in the game completing Blaze Slayer only really went as far as tier 2 daggers. That's because tier 2 daggers were relatively affordable, around about 30 million coins for the longest time, and tier 3 daggers were ridiculously expensive. It is as well just about possible to complete a tier 4 Blaze Slayer with tier 2 daggers, although it does take considerably longer because you don't deal as much damage. And yeah, it's much more worth it to have tier 3 daggers because you can improve your efficiency and consistency of the bosses. Anyway, the main cost in crafting the tier 3 daggers from the tier 2 is the fact that you need 16 infernal vertexes per dagger, meaning that you need 32, half a stack of vertexes. Now at the moment, if we just go to buy 16 instantly, that's going to cost us 110 million coins. So in total, it's going to cost us 220 million coins for the vertexes to upgrade our daggers from tier 2 to tier 3. Now getting to tier 2 daggers probably cost around about 25 million coins each, so it's really not too expensive. And at the moment, you're thinking, well, what's the issue? But if we look at this 2-month graph of the prices of infernal vertexes, we can see at the moment, yes, they're sitting at around, well, about 6 mil. Okay. We look back in time and you see they're up to 12 mil, 17 mil, 23 mil, and they were actually up at 45 mil. Now, that's as far as I can go back without actually paying for the further back feature, so I assume this went even higher. So let's assume they were 46 million coins each. That equates to around about 1.5 billion coins to upgrade these daggers. But they were definitely even more expensive. Considering if we look at the all-time auction house graphs for a Death Ripper dagger, you can see as little as like 4 months ago, for a good Death Ripper dagger you were paying over 1.5 billion coins. They started to drop, as you can see, like because of the drop in prices of vertexes. But yeah, crazy. You can see they were always way, way higher. I think realistically, the consensus was for the longest time, if you wanted a good pair of daggers, you were paying over 1 billion coins each, maybe close to 1.2, 1.3 billion, depending on what you actually had on the daggers. But of course, you must couple that with everything else you need to do tier 4 Blaze. For example, something like a G-Drag would be recommended. A setup including a Warden helmet, probably half of a good Crimson setup, and then also a pretty good Sorrow's chestplate. I mean, a lot of this is for survivability, especially the Sorrow chestplate, so if you're a really high level, then you might not even have to bother with this. True defense is key against the Blaze Slayer bosses, so that's the reason for it. You can put a Topaz gemstone in there too, so it's actually really good. Anyway, the bottom line is, if you look for a decent Death Ripper dagger, how much are you paying? Let's see. We'll look for a really, I mean, you don't need Chimera. Realistically, the only thing you're going to use is Swarm. So let's say, for instance, this one here with Sharpness 6, 175 mil. And ironically, that's actually the cheapest one on the AH by the looks of it. So 175 mil as opposed to 1.3 billion. It's the same weapon. So we now know, in able to actually be able to do Blade Slayer, the setup that you need has now dropped considerably by around about 2.2, 2.3 billion coins. But that begs the question. The tier 3 daggers have now been considerably cheaper for a good couple of months. Does that mean that Blade Slayer makes way less coins? Well, you would think so, right? Because there's way less barriers to entry to actually be able to do Blade Slayer. It costs way less coins to get into it. Let's take a look at something like a high-class Archfiend dice. You come to realise, actually, the price has been pretty stable. I mean, when it first came out, yeah, sure, it was way more expensive, but that's, of course, as expected. And then from a point of, like, I don't know, where it starts to stabilise, I don't know, we take something like 48 mil for being the price of a dice, and then we kind of just look to how much they're worth today, at around about 40 mil, and it's not really declined much at all, which is still really good. Okay, so let's take a look at duplex books, for instance. And I've been trying this for like 5 minutes now. Bazaar Tracker just does not want to bring up the prices for duplex books. But I know that these definitely have decreased. They used to be about 20 million coins for quite a while, maybe even higher towards the start of Blade Slayer, which is kind of relevant. But for a long time they sat between 15 to 20 mil, and now they're about 8 or 9 mil. So they have dropped. But a lot of the time you're making money from like the distillate that you drop, also the derelict ash that you guaranteed to drop. Meaning that majority of the time, the bosses break even without you even dropping anything good. The great thing about Blade Slayer, and I've talked about this in the past, is the fact that items like the high-class dice, which go for 40 million coins, are a 0.25% chance of dropping, which for that item is actually really good. It's a 1 in 400 chance, but when you compare this against any other drop from any other Slayer, nothing has anywhere near as good return in terms of the amount of money that you get for the actual chances to drop it. Even the duplex book that we were talking about, it sells for 9 million coins, and you've got close enough to a 2% chance of dropping it. Probably works out at about 1 in 60, which isn't bad at all again. And yeah, sure, in terms of other Slayers, you could drop something worth way more expensive, like from Zombie Slayer Wardenheart, from Sven Slayer, the Overflux Capacitor, from Enderman Slayer, the Judgment Core. I mean, I'm not trying to deny any of this, but they're all very unlikely. Like, it's really unlikely that you're going to drop any of those. And if you compare your chances of dropping those in terms of the coins, so what you can drop from Blade Slayer, it just is statistically more probable that you're going to make more coins from Blade Slayer. So, I guess my question is, why are more people not doing Blade Slayer? If you can pick up the two best weapons for between 350 to 400 million coins, it seems like a bit of a no-brainer, considering they were both like 1.2 billion coins each. And you may ask, you know, why? Well, why? How come these daggers have actually dropped in price? What happens to the prices of Vertex? Well, the price of Vertex are not connected to Blade Slayer at all, because you don't drop Vertexes from Blade Slayer, you drop Vertexes from Infernal minions, which are essentially the Blade Slayer minions. Now, about a month ago, maybe slightly longer ago now, there was a bug where people could obtain way more Vertexes than you should have been able to through a bug. That bug is no longer in the game, and people got punished for doing that bug, whether a correct punishment or not. And I think that really has contributed towards the demise in price of the Vertex. However, it was still on the low before then. It was still going down. And that's just simply because people discovered how good Inferno minions really could be, meaning that more and more people placed them, meaning more and more people were dropping Vertexes from them, meaning that the prices dropped, which actually affected the, I guess, barriers to entry of doing Blade Slayer, which is actually kind of strange, considering we don't really see this mechanic in many other Slayers. Now sure, the reason why duplex books are now cheaper is because more and more people drop them, meaning that more people have done Blade Slayer. It's not been any secret for the past few months that Blade Slayer has actually been really, really profitable, and it has been for, well, pretty much since it came out. It's just always had such high barriers to entry. But it is, to be completely honest, really, really surprising that the tier 3 daggers are now that cheap, because everyone always saw them as this, like, all-seeing sort of duo of weapons that was just basically a sign of mass destruction. To see them at like less than 200 mil each is just really, really, really strange. But I guess with the context of what's gone on in Skyblock in the past few months, it does make sense why they're so cheap. It just doesn't seem right. But let me know in the comments, have you done Blade Slayer yet as a money-making method, or are you going to try it? Did you know that these daggers were so cheap? Anyway, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you do leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.